Meet the Discovery Sport, the latest addition to the Land Rover family. While it wears a familiar badge, the addition of the Sport moniker makes it quite a different vehicle. It's smaller than the real Discovery and more affordable. That makes it a direct competitor to two giants of the luxury SUV sphere, the BMW X3 and Audi Q5. Huge competition then, but which is the best way to spend almost 70 grand? For this test we've chosen the diesel models, partly because they're a more popular choice, but largely because the Disco Sport has a lineup heavily focused on diesels. Yes, there's a petrol option, but it's only a single model. So that's potentially one black mark against the Discovery, but there's still plenty to like, starting with the design. It's pretty clever both inside and outside where it looks great. Space is something the Discovery has in spades, particularly in the back seat, where not only can you slide that rear seat back and forward, but you've also got plenty of headroom, plenty of legroom, so it's pretty good going. And the Disco has a trick that no others in the class can match, an optional third row of seats. Now our car doesn't have it, and I wouldn't want to shoehorn my way in there anyway, but as an occasional seat it's a handy option. The Sport also comes reasonably well equipped with full leather seats, a reversing camera and electric front seats. And it's the only car here with an auto emergency braking system standard. Now that can help avoid a crash. One of the things the Disco Sport has in its armoury is some decent off-road ability, so you can adjust the traction control and so on to rocks, sand, snow, whatever it might be. It also sits a little bit higher, so you've got a bit more ride height to get over rocks and other obstacles. The downside of that is on the road, where you do feel that it can lean a little bit more than its competitors. And once you start pushing on, you push a little bit harder into a corner, for example, the stability control will kick in sooner. So it tries to grab everything and just sort it out. Still very good in the way it drives. It's still more car-like than four-wheel drive-like, but not quite up to the standard of something like the BM. The interior is well thought out too in terms of storage, so decent-sized cup holders, a good little shelf above the glove box, big door pockets, so things like that all make sense for a car that's going to have lots of things thrown at it. The engine is the biggest here as well, 2.2 litres. It also gets a 9-speed automatic, so plenty of ratios to choose from. You find that ninth gear doesn't get used a whole lot. When you're cruising, it will settle between 7th and 8th gear. Around town it is more useful. It sort of chooses the right gear. It does a pretty good job of it actually. Now onto a familiar face, the Audi Q5. It's a car with plenty of followers and with good reason. There's plenty to like with the Q5 and it's easy to see why it's been such a big seller. And one of the best bits is the interior. It still looks fresh even though the car is getting on a bit in life. You've got plenty of sort of bright work and metal finishes to liven things up a bit, and everything's nicely laid out and very clear to see, so it works well. Where the Audi does lose out a bit is in the rear seats. It's got a little bit lower seat backs, not as much leg room, although you can slide those rear seats back and forward, which is a nice touch. On the road the Q5 has very light steering, not quite as much feel as the BMWs, but there's enough there, particularly midway through a bend you start to feel it load up a little bit. The suspension is very reassuring in terms of how it sits and how it reacts. It sometimes rebounds a little bit too much off a bump, but quickly catches it and settles, so it is very good and highly capable when you do ramp the pace up a bit. Not as quiet as some in terms of road noise, so you do get a bit of tyre noise going on, but it's not excessive. The engine's good, but it can be a little bit lethargic off the line, so you pull up, floor it, and just takes just a fraction to get going. Part of that's in the gearbox, the twin clutch automatic, so sometimes it sort of gets a little bit caught out, but once you're moving, it is fantastic. It's very, very smooth in the way it shifts and does a great job of picking the right gears. But the Audi's not perfect, and one thing that stands out is the reversing camera. It's an option. At this end of the market, it really should be standard. At the end of the day, there's not a whole lot wrong with the Audi, but there's just tiny little bits here and there that knock it back a little bit compared with its competitors. Wherever Audi treads, BMW is rarely far behind or ahead. The X3 goes up head-to-head with the Q5. When you first get in the X3, it does feel a little bit plain in terms of the, I guess, the darkness of the interior, but it's actually really well laid out, and I love the programmable buttons. 8 of them. You can obviously get radio stations and stuff, but also program sat-nav addresses, phone numbers, all sorts of things, so it's pretty handy setup. And everything's logically laid out, which works alright. BMW's also ramped up the value on the X3, so they've thrown plenty of equipment at it. There's satellite navigation, a reversing camera and an emergency assist system which can call an ambulance after a crash. And the interior is a decent size but also very comfortable. So rear seat space, for example, is not bad, and up front, fine. Got good support from the seats and it all works well. But it's the way the X3 drives that makes it a standout. It has nicely weighted steering, hangs on really well around corners, so you can push it quite hard, and it still feels very athletic in the way it does it, and also very competent. This car I'm in's riding on the M Sport suspension, which is a fair bit firmer than the regular setup. If it were my money, I'd be sticking with that regular system. Got a bit more compliance. That said, it's not bad. It's mainly on poorer quality surfaces where you start to really notice it. The diesel engine is very grunty, so it pulls quite strongly in the middle revs and works really well with the 8-speed auto, so it's rarely wrong-footed in terms of what gear it wants to be in. So 3 very strong cars, each with their own pros and cons. The Discovery Sport has space on its side as well as a clever interior, but it's let down by its engine, particularly when it comes to refinement. The Audi drives well, but it misses out on some key equipment, including a reversing camera, which leaves the BMW. It's the best car to drive and it comes well equipped. Just don't bother with that firm M Sport suspension.